Now the purpose of the pressure regulator, as I mentioned when we did the close-up, is to apply the pressure on the fabric. So if you start to sew and the fabric, the stitches don't look like they're coming out too good, you can adjust the pressure on the pressure foot. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is that most manufacturers preset this. So you're probably rarely going to have to adjust this knob. You may start to notice that your fabric may not move as freely as it should. Then that means it might not have enough pressure and the valve is popped up. So with the valve down, and that's about the normal setting there. So your machine pretty much already has this preset, so you should not have to adjust this in the future. But there again, check with your operation manual because each sewing machine company is different. Our next part is the take-up lever, and it's just a little lever right here in the front. It's also like a thread guide as well because it has a hole where you can thread the fabric, the thread through, but it's actually used to take the thread up and down so that it connects with the bobbin. Let's get a close-up look of the take-up lever. Now this is a pretty good close-up picture of the take-up lever. As I mentioned, you see how the lever goes up and down, and it's kind of hard to see this, but there's a little spot right there that has a little groove or opening. That's going to be one of our thread guides, which we'll show you that later as well. But now we're just going to identify the part and what it does. Our next part is the upper thread tension dial. And it's pretty much just that. It's a little dial on my machine that sits right up here on top of the machine, and it has little numbers on it. Now the purpose for this dial is to adjust the amount of tension that's on the upper thread, because you know there's two threads to sewing. There's an upper thread and a lower thread, and this particular dial is used to adjust the tension on the upper thread. But let's get a closer look at that because I want you to see the numbers on it. Now as you notice on the dial there are numbers, and right now you see number 4, 5, and 6. And also you notice that there's a black line above the numbers. The purpose for that is because the manufacturer has determined that that's a standard setting for your machine. So you pretty much will be always sewing within this range. However, the dial does go all the way up to 9, which makes the stitching a little tighter. And if you're using a thicker thread, you might want to use a 9 or 8. But maybe not likely. Most of your sewing you're going to be using between 4, 5, and 6. So I would just set mine on a standard setting, the one that comes with your machine, or the number 5. Our next part is the upper thread guides. Now on my machine, and probably on your machine, there are going to be several different guides, and these guides are used for threading the machine. And in my case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's get a close-up look at those, and I'll identify each one again. Okay, my first thread guide, pretend my spool is sitting here. My first thread guide will be this little guy right here. This is the first loop of mine, and the thread goes right up under that and goes right to the next guide. So let's take a good look at this, close-up look at this first guide. Now looking at this closely, you see the little hole there. There's a little hole right up under the little guide, and that's where my thread will loop right up under that guide.